I want to talk to you today about the first thing to do in winter. Last week we talked about the idea of what to do when it's summertime and the living is easy. And I think we ought to talk more about that. I think if we would live better in the summer, our winters would not be so severe. But this week we're talking about what is the first thing to do in winter. It occurs to me that you can measure the maturity of a man by several things. We tend to measure the maturity of a man by how often does he go to church, or maybe how often does he read his Bible. But I think fundamentally those things are means to an end. They're a good thing and they lead us to something, but they lead us to godliness, and that godliness can be measured in other ways. For example, we could measure godliness by asking how long between when you wake up and your first thought of gratitude. Is it mid-afternoon before your first thought of gratitude? If it is, I think you ought to get a little brown pair of slippers like I have, and I slip my feet into those slippers, and I think, thank you, Lord, for those slippers every morning. And you ought to say, thank God for the cup of coffee, and thank God for the forgiveness of my sins. And before your day gets started, you ought to be on a riff of saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Another measure of godliness is to ask yourself, how long between an answer to prayer? You cry out to God in winter, and God answers your prayer. And how long does it take you to come back and say thank you? And we think about those 10 lepers that Jesus healed, and only one came back. And there's a tendency for us to receive the blessings of God and not say thank you. But a third measure of maturity is to ask the question, how long before, when winter starts, how long before you cry out to God in prayer? The first thing that we ought to do is to cry out to God in prayer. That's what I'm going to try to figure out. And by the way, each week I'm going to try to figure out what is that big idea on Monday. My study week goes like this. Sunday, I try to read over the text. Sunday morning, I'm going to teach the text, and then Sunday afternoon, sometimes on the way home, I'll ask my wife to read me the text, or somewhere time during the day, I'll read the text. Last night, it happened to me, it often happens to me. I'll say, honey, after we finish watching this show, I'd like for you to help me with next week's sermon. And I just want to read the text to you, and let's talk for just a second about what might be the main idea. And I already got figured out that it's Monday for me, and I got figured out the main idea for next week's passage. And then I will look for a number of books. I spend a good deal of time hiking these days, and I'll look for a couple of books that deal with this passage. This last week I read the entire copy of Philip Yancey's book on prayer, and Breakthrough Prayer by Jim Simla. Very different books, but both very helpful. Yancey's book, written by a researcher. I'd say he has an above average prayer life, a good prayer life, but maybe not an amazing prayer life. I think he would say that himself if Yancey were to hear this video. But then the Jim Simla, I would put him as a prayer warrior in this generation. And both of them had some great insights into prayer. And so we want to read and study as much as we can. We want to figure out what is the big idea. I'm going to try to figure that out by Monday. Do the bulk of my study on Monday and ask is, what is the single idea I want to try to communicate the next week? And then on Tuesday, I want to ask the question, how can I make it unforgettable? And if you will look in the PowerPoint that is provided for you through this service, you will find some videos that will make this week's lesson absolutely unforgettable. Not because I'm going to say something unforgettable today, because this talk I give might be thoroughly forgettable, but the videos I'm going to provide, there's 3 videos in there, 2 of them from one of Jim Simla's talks and one from Louis Giglio's talk, absolutely unforgettable. And so that's what we want to ask on Tuesday. How can I make this message unforgettable? And one key way of making it unforgettable is